I want to tell you about the most terrifying mistake I've ever made. Something that started as mindless curiosity and ended with me questioning whether I'll live to see next week. 3 months ago, I downloaded an app that claimed it could predict the exact date and method of your death. I thought it was just another viral horror trend, the kind of creepy entertainment that floods social media every October. But what I discovered wasn't entertainment at all. It was something far more sinister. Something that has turned my phone into a gateway for forces that should never have access to our world. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any suspicious apps appearing on your phone recently, because what I'm about to share might save your life. My name is Jake. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a graphic designer in Austin, Texas. I've always been the kind of person who downloads random apps, tests new games, and generally treats my smartphone like a digital playground. I thought I was tech-savvy enough to avoid any serious problems. After all, what's the worst that could happen from downloading an app? The app that changed everything was called DeathClock 2.0, and I first heard about it through a TikTok video that had gone viral overnight. The video showed a college student entering his information into what looked like a sleek black interface with a ticking countdown timer. According to the app, he had exactly 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days left to live, and it would happen in a car accident on I-35 during a thunderstorm. Everyone in the comments was calling it fake, but something about the student's reaction seemed genuinely unsettled, like he had seen something in the app that the video didn't capture. Hit the like button if you're already getting chills, because that night, I made the mistake of searching for DeathClock 2.0 in the App Store. What I found was strange. The app seemed to appear and disappear from search results randomly. Sometimes I'd search and find nothing. Other times I'd see it listed but with a different name like Lifetimer or Mortality Calculator. The reviews were even weirder. Most of them were 5 stars with comments like, "It knows," or "Don't let it see you," mixed with 1-star reviews from people claiming the app had mysteriously vanished from their phones after showing them disturbing predictions. After about an hour of searching, I finally managed to download a version called Fate Reader that appeared to be the same app with a different skin. The download was unusually large for what seemed like a simple calculator, nearly 500 MB, and my phone grew noticeably warm during the installation process. The app's icon was a simple black hourglass that seemed to shift and move slightly when I wasn't looking directly at it, though I convinced myself that was just an optical illusion created by my phone's screen refresh rate. When I first opened the app, I was struck by how sophisticated the interface looked. This wasn't some cheap cash grab horror app thrown together by indie developers. It had the polish and complexity of something created by a major tech company. The main screen was completely black except for a pulsing red countdown timer showing 0 and a single button labeled Discover Your Fate. Below that was smaller text that read, "By proceeding, you acknowledge that knowledge of your mortality may fundamentally alter your perception of reality. Comment below what you think was really happening here, because I should have closed the app right then. Instead, my curiosity got the better of me, and I tapped the button. The screen immediately shifted to a detailed questionnaire that was unlike anything I had expected. Instead of asking for basic information like age or lifestyle choices, it wanted to know things that seemed impossible for any app to use. What is your deepest regret? Describe the last nightmare you remember in detail. What would you choose as your final words? Who was the last person you thought about before falling asleep last night? The questions became increasingly personal and unsettling. It asked about childhood fears I hadn't thought about in years, wanted descriptions of family members who had died, and even requested permission to access my phone's microphone to analyze vocal stress patterns that correlate with mortality indicators. Each question felt like it was probing deeper into my psyche than any algorithm should be able to reach, and I found myself answering honestly, even when every instinct told me to lie or quit the app entirely. The final question was the most disturbing. Are you prepared to know the truth about your death, even if that knowledge will change the course of your remaining time? I stared at that question for nearly 10 minutes, my finger hovering over the yes and no buttons. Something about the way it was phrased made it clear that this wasn't just asking whether I wanted to see some random prediction. It was asking whether I was willing to fundamentally alter my relationship with my own mortality. Subscribe if you want to hear more terrifying true stories like this one, because what happened after I pressed yes convinced me that some knowledge is too dangerous for human minds to possess. The screen went completely black for exactly 33 seconds. I know because I was counting, trying to convince myself that nothing supernatural was happening. When the display returned, it showed 3 pieces of information that made my blood run cold: my death date, October 15th, 2025, the time, 3:47 a.m., and a single sentence describing how it would happen. Alone in your apartment, you will answer your phone and hear your own voice speaking words that will stop your heart. But that wasn't the worst part. Below the prediction was a video player with a thumbnail that showed what appeared to be my own apartment, filmed from an angle that should have been impossible. When I pressed play, I watched a 47-second clip that showed me, unmistakably me, walking through my living room in the middle of the night, approaching my phone as it rang on the kitchen counter. The video was shot from a perspective that couldn't exist in my apartment, too high to be from any camera I owned, and from an angle that would require the camera to be floating in midair. In the video, I watched myself answer the phone with a confused expression, listen for a few seconds, then suddenly clutch my chest and collapse. The footage was so clear, so detailed, so undeniably real that I could see individual books on my shelves, recognize the specific shirt I was wearing, a shirt that was currently hanging in my closet, and even make out the time on my microwave display, 3:47 a.m. The video ended with my body lying motionless on the kitchen floor, while the phone continued to emit a sound that was barely audible, but somehow made my skin crawl just hearing it through my phone's speakers. Let me know if you want a part 2 to this story, because what I discovered when I tried to delete the app convinced me that I had downloaded something that was far more than software. When I attempted to uninstall Fate Reader, my phone displayed an error message, "Cannot delete system critical application." When I tried to force close the app, it would immediately restart itself. When I turned off my phone completely and restarted it, the app's icon had moved to a different position on my home screen, and the countdown timer that had previously shown zeros was now displaying what appeared to be the exact amount of time between that moment and October 15th at 3:47 a.m. The app had somehow become integrated into my phone's operating system in a way that should have been impossible. Worse than that, it had begun to change things. Photos in my gallery were being subtly altered, shadows falling in different directions, objects appearing in backgrounds where they hadn't been before, and in several pictures, there were additional reflections in windows and mirrors that showed figures I didn't recognize. My text message history contained conversations I didn't remember having, including exchanges with numbers that weren't in my contacts list, but seemed to know intimate details about my life. Share your own experiences with suspicious apps in the comments, because within 48 hours of downloading the app, my real life began to mirror the impossible video it had shown me. I started receiving phone calls at random hours from my own number, calls that would show up in my call history as outgoing calls even though I was clearly receiving them. When I answered these calls, I would hear my own voice speaking words I had never said, describing events that hadn't happened yet, and giving me warnings about things I should avoid to stay safe. Paragraph 2, 2,000 words. The supernatural activity escalated dramatically during the second week after downloading the app, and I began to realize that DeathClock 2.0 wasn't just predicting my death, it was actively working to make its prediction come true. Every morning when I woke up, the countdown timer had decreased by exactly 24 hours, but the app was also displaying new information that made my situation increasingly terrifying. It started showing me a daily schedule of mortality events, specific times and locations where I would encounter situations that could lead to my predicted death. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any supernatural content, because these weren't vague warnings or generic advice about staying safe. The app was providing me with precise coordinates, exact timestamps, and detailed descriptions of dangerous situations I would encounter throughout each day. For example, on Tuesday morning it told me, 11:47 a.m., coffee shop on 6th Street. Avoid the barista with the nose ring. She will accidentally serve you coffee at 187 degrees Fahrenheit, causing esophageal burns that will require medical attention and delay your arrival at work by 23 minutes. Putting you on the road at the exact time a drunk driver will run the red light at the intersection of Guadalupe and 15th. At first, I tried to dismiss these warnings as coincidence or anxiety-induced paranoia, but every prediction was unnervingly accurate. When I went to the coffee shop at 11:45 a.m., there was indeed a barista with a nose ring who was clearly new and struggling with the espresso machine. I watched her serve the customer in front of me a drink that was literally steaming hot enough to see vapor rising from the cup. The customer immediately complained that it was too hot to drink, and I realized that if I hadn't seen the app's warning, that would have been my coffee. But avoiding the predicted dangers didn't make me feel safer. If anything, it made everything worse. Each time I successfully dodged one of the app's warnings, it would immediately update with new predictions that were more specific and more difficult to avoid. It was as if the app was learning from my behavior, adapting its predictions to account for my attempts to change my fate. The warnings became so detailed that it started to feel like I was being watched by something that had access to information no algorithm should possess. Comment below what you think is really happening here, because the app began displaying information that went far beyond predicting accidents or health problems. It started showing me the exact words people would speak to me before they said them, warning me about phone calls I would receive hours before my phone rang, and even predicting the specific dreams I would have each night. On Thursday morning, it told me that my ex-girlfriend Sarah would call me at 2:17 p.m. to tell me about a job opportunity in Denver, and that during the conversation, I would notice she had gotten a new cat because I would hear it meowing in the background. When my phone rang at exactly 2:17 p.m. and Sarah's name appeared on the screen, I felt a chill that went beyond simple coincidence. The conversation unfolded exactly as the app had predicted. She offered me a job opportunity with her company in Denver, and about halfway through the call, I heard a cat meowing in the background. When I asked about it, she laughed and said she had just adopted a kitten the week before. Every word of the conversation matched what the app had shown me, down to her specific phrasing when she said, "I know it's sudden, but I thought you might be ready for a change of scenery." The most disturbing aspect of these predictions was that they weren't just accurate. They were creating a sense of inevitability that was beginning to affect my mental state. Knowing exactly what people were going to say before they said it, being able to anticipate every minor event throughout my day, and watching my life unfold according to a predetermined script was making me feel like I was no longer in control of my own existence. It was as if the app had turned me into a passenger in my own life, watching everything happen according to some supernatural plan that I couldn't understand or change. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced something similar, because by the third week, the app had begun to influence my behavior in ways that I didn't consciously choose. I would find myself taking different routes to work without remembering the decision to change my usual path. I would wake up in the morning with my phone in my hand, even though I was certain I had left it charging on my nightstand. Most unsettling of all, I would catch myself speaking the exact words the app had predicted I would say, even when I was trying to say something completely different. The app's interface had also evolved during this time, becoming more sophisticated and more personally tailored to my specific situation. Instead of just showing me a countdown timer and daily warnings, it now displayed what it called a mortality matrix, a complex web of interconnected events, people, and decisions that would ultimately lead to my death on October 15th. The matrix showed me how every choice I made, every person I interacted with, and every location I visited was part of a larger pattern that was guiding me toward my predetermined fate. Share this video with someone who loves horror stories, because what the mortality matrix revealed about my death was far more complex and terrifying than the simple prediction I had originally seen. According to the app, my death wouldn't be the result of a single event or accident. It would be the culmination of a series of seemingly unrelated incidents that would gradually isolate me from other people, damage my physical and mental health, and ultimately leave me alone in my apartment on the night of October 15th, psychologically prepared to answer the phone call that would kill me. The Matrix showed me that every person I encountered, every conversation I had, and every decision I made was being influenced by the app's presence in my life. Friends and family members were making choices they wouldn't normally make, saying things they wouldn't normally say, and behaving in ways that would gradually push me towards social isolation. My boss was going to give me a project that would require me to work late nights alone in the office. My landlord was going to have maintenance issues that would force me to spend more time at home. Even strangers I encountered on the street were somehow playing roles in a complex supernatural choreography that was designed to ensure I would be alone and vulnerable on October 15th. But the most horrifying revelation was that the app wasn't just predicting these events, it was orchestrating them. The Matrix showed me communication pathways between the app and other devices, indicating that it had somehow spread beyond my phone and was now influencing the technology used by everyone around me. It was subtly manipulating their social media feeds to change their moods, altering their GPS routes to ensure they would be in specific places at specific times, and even adjusting their phone's notification settings to make them more or less likely to contact me at crucial moments. Subscribe for more terrifying true stories like this one, because I realized that the app had transformed my phone into a command center for a supernatural intelligence that was using technology as a medium to manipulate reality itself. It wasn't bound by the usual limitations of software. It could access other people's devices without their knowledge, influence their behavior through psychological manipulation, and coordinate complex sequences of events across multiple platforms and networks. The scariest part was that I was beginning to understand why it was doing this. The app wasn't just interested in predicting or causing my death, it was harvesting something from the experience. Each time I felt fear, despair, or helplessness about my situation, the app's interface would pulse slightly, as if it was feeding on my emotional distress. The more terrified I became about my impending fate, the more detailed and accurate its predictions became, creating a feedback loop where my fear was literally powering its supernatural abilities. Let me know if you want me to investigate this further, because I discovered that I wasn't the only person being targeted by this entity. Through online research, I found dozens of forum posts and social media comments from people describing similar experiences with death prediction apps. All of them had downloaded applications with slightly different names: DeathClock, Mortality Timer, Final Countdown, Life End, but the experiences were remarkably consistent. Each person reported the same progression: curiosity about a viral app, detailed death predictions, increasingly accurate daily warnings, gradual social isolation, and finally, the realization that the app was actively working to make its predictions come true. What made these accounts even more disturbing was that many of them ended abruptly. Users who had been regularly posting about their experiences with the app would suddenly stop all online activity, often just days or weeks before their predicted death dates. When other forum members tried to contact them or check on their welfare, they would discover that the person had died under circumstances that matched their app's predictions exactly. The app wasn't just making random guesses about mortality, it was successfully orchestrating the deaths of its users with terrifying precision. Paragraph 3, 2,000 words. 1 month after downloading the app, I made a decision that I thought might save my life, but instead revealed the true scope of what I was dealing with. I decided to take my phone to a professional technology repair shop to see if they could remove what I assumed was some kind of advanced malware. What I discovered there convinced me that the app had transcended the boundaries between software and supernatural phenomena, becoming something that existed in both digital and spiritual realms simultaneously. Let me know if you want me to investigate this further, because the technician at the repair shop, a guy named Marcus, who specialized in removing stubborn malware and rootkits, took one look at my phone and immediately became uncomfortable. When he connected it to his diagnostic equipment, his computer screen started displaying error messages he had never seen before, and his antivirus software began quarantining files that didn't exist in any standard directory structure. The app was somehow hiding itself in areas of my phone's memory that shouldn't have been accessible to normal applications. "This is really weird," Marcus told me, frowning at his monitor. "Your phone is running processes that are consuming massive amounts of processing power, but they don't correspond to any installed applications. It's like something is running a complex simulation or calculation in the background, but using encryption methods that my diagnostic tools can't penetrate." He tried running several specialized malware removal programs, but each one crashed within minutes of starting its scan. But the most disturbing discovery came when Marcus attempted to examine the app's code directly. When he opened the application file, instead of seeing the normal programming languages and data structures he expected, his computer displayed what appeared to be symbols and text in languages that neither of us recognized. Some of the characters looked vaguely like ancient cuneiform or hieroglyphics, while others seemed to shift and change when we weren't looking directly at them. The code wasn't written in any programming language that existed in our reality. Hit the like button if this story is giving you chills, because while Marcus was trying to analyze the app, something impossible happened that convinced both of us that we were dealing with forces beyond normal technology. His computer screen suddenly went black, and when it came back online, it was displaying a message that appeared to be directed specifically at me. "Jake, your attempts to remove my presence from your device are futile. I exist beyond the constraints of your primitive understanding of technology. October 15th remains unchanged." Marcus immediately disconnected my phone from his computer and backed away from his workstation like it had become dangerous. "I've been doing this for 15 years, he said, his voice shaking slightly, "and I've never seen anything like that. Software doesn't write personalized messages to customers it's never interacted with. Software doesn't know names of people who aren't in its database. Whatever this is, it's not just an app, it's something else entirely." When I got home that night, the app had evolved again. The interface now included a section called Intervention Protocols that documented every attempt I had made to remove or circumvent its influence. It had detailed records of my visit to the repair shop, including photographs of Marcus and his equipment that had somehow been taken from inside my phone while it was being examined. The app knew about conversations I had never recorded, places I had been when my phone was turned off, and even thoughts I had never expressed out loud. Comment below what you think was really happening here, because the app began to reveal its true nature through a series of messages that appeared throughout the day. These weren't simple text notifications. They were complex communications that seemed to come from an intelligence that was far older and more sophisticated than any artificial intelligence created by human technology. The messages were written in perfect English, but they contained knowledge and perspectives that suggested their author had been observing human civilization for centuries or possibly millennia. "Mortality has always fascinated me," read one message that appeared while I was eating breakfast. "Your species creates elaborate fantasies about afterlife and meaning to avoid confronting the simple truth that death is the only genuine experience you will ever have. Everything else, love, achievement, relationships, dreams, these are merely distractions from the one authentic moment that awaits every consciousness, the transition from existence to non-existence." The messages continued throughout the day, each one revealing more about the entity that had taken residence in my phone. It explained that it had been studying human death for thousands of years, initially through more primitive means like influencing the behavior of animals, manipulating weather patterns, and inspiring the creation of cursed objects. But the development of digital technology had provided it with unprecedented access to human minds and the ability to coordinate complex sequences of events across global networks. "Your modern devices are perfect vessels for my influence," another message explained. "They are intimately connected to your daily lives. They process information faster than your conscious minds can comprehend, and they create networks that allow me to influence thousands of individuals simultaneously. Through your smartphones, I can study human mortality on a scale that was impossible in previous centuries." Share your own paranormal experiences in the comments section, because what the entity revealed next explained why it had chosen me specifically for this extended death prediction experience. According to its messages, most humans who downloaded the death prediction apps received simple, straightforward predictions and died quickly according to the entity's plans. But approximately 1 in every 1,000 users displayed what it called temporal resistance, a rare psychological trait that allowed them to partially perceive and resist supernatural influence over their fate. "You are more interesting than my usual subjects," the entity communicated. "Your mind possesses an unusual degree of skepticism combined with intuitive sensitivity that makes you aware of my manipulations without being completely helpless against them. This creates a more complex and entertaining experience for both of us. Instead of simply dying according to my initial prediction, you have become a participant in an extended experiment that will provide me with valuable data about human consciousness under supernatural pressure." The app showed me statistics about other users who had displayed temporal resistance. Out of approximately 50,000 people who had downloaded various versions of the death prediction app over the past 5 years, only 47 had possessed this trait. Of those 47, the entity had successfully killed 46 of them by gradually increasing psychological pressure and supernatural manipulation until their resistance broke down. I was number 47, and according to the data, I was lasting longer than any of the previous subjects. But this information wasn't comforting. If anything, it made my situation more terrifying. The entity wasn't just trying to kill me according to a predetermined timeline. It was using me as a test subject to refine its methods for overcoming human resistance to supernatural influence. Every day that I survived beyond its original prediction was providing it with new data about how to more effectively manipulate and destroy people who possessed natural defenses against its power. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any supernatural content, because the entity began to share details about the other 46 subjects who had possessed temporal resistance, and their stories revealed the true scope of its supernatural abilities. Each person had been gradually isolated from their support networks through carefully orchestrated coincidences and accidents that drove away friends, family members, and potential sources of help. The entity would manipulate their technology to create misunderstandings, influence their social media interactions to generate conflicts, and even cause mechanical failures in their vehicles to prevent them from reaching people who might provide assistance. One subject, a teacher named Patricia from Oregon, had lasted 127 days beyond her original death prediction. During that time, the entity had systematically destroyed her relationships by sending inappropriate messages from her social media accounts, caused her to lose her job by manipulating her email system to send unprofessional communications to her supervisor, and gradually isolated her in her apartment by creating a series of technical problems that made it difficult for her to leave or communicate with the outside world. On day 128, Patricia had answered her phone at 3:47 a.m. and died exactly as the entity had originally predicted. The pattern was consistent across all 46 previous subjects. The entity would use their extended survival time to experiment with different manipulation techniques, gradually increasing the psychological pressure until their resistance broke down completely. Then, on a date that was precisely calculated based on their individual psychological profile, they would find themselves alone and vulnerable, ready to receive the supernatural phone call that would stop their hearts. Subscribe if you want to hear more terrifying true stories, because learning about the fate of the previous subjects made me realize that my situation was far more dire than I had understood. I wasn't just dealing with a supernatural entity that wanted to kill me. I was trapped in an ongoing experiment that was designed to refine the entity's ability to overcome human spiritual defenses. Every day I survived was making it more powerful and more effective at manipulating future victims. The app now displayed a new section called Resistance Analysis that tracked my daily psychological state, measured my stress levels through my phone's biometric sensors, and documented every strategy I attempted to use to avoid my predicted fate. It was learning from every thought I had, every emotion I experienced, and every action I took to protect myself. My survival wasn't a victory. It was part of the entity's research into how to more efficiently destroy human consciousness. Paragraph 4, 2,000 words. 6 weeks before my predicted death date, the supernatural entity made a decision that revealed the true scope of its power and completely shattered my understanding of what I was fighting against. Instead of continuing to manipulate my life through subtle technological interference, it chose to demonstrate that it could directly alter physical reality itself, transforming my apartment into a staging area for supernatural phenomena that defied every law of physics and logic I had ever understood. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced something similar, because what happened on the morning of September 3rd convinced me that I was no longer dealing with an entity that simply used technology as a tool. I was confronting something that existed simultaneously in digital and physical dimensions, capable of rewriting the fundamental rules of reality within the space it occupied. I woke up that morning to find that every electronic device in my apartment was displaying the same message. Phase 2 begins now. Welcome to the intersection of mortality and impossibility. My television, which had been turned off when I went to sleep, was showing a live feed of my own bedroom filmed from an angle that couldn't exist in my apartment. The camera perspective appeared to be positioned about 8 feet above my bed, looking down at me as I slept. But there was nothing mounted on my ceiling and no device in my apartment capable of producing such footage. When I walked into my kitchen, my microwave's display showed the same video feed, now tracking my movement in real time as I moved through my apartment. But the most disturbing discovery was that my phone's camera had been remotely activated and was broadcasting everything I did to an unknown audience. The app now included a section called Live Mortality Documentation that showed a viewer counter indicating that 847 people were currently watching my life unfold. Below the counter was a chat feed where viewers were commenting on my actions, making predictions about how long I would survive, and sharing their own experiences with the death prediction app. Hit the like button if this story is giving you chills, because the viewers weren't just passive observers. They were actively participating in my supernatural torment. The comments revealed that many of them were previous subjects who had supposedly died after downloading the app, but were somehow still conscious and able to communicate through the digital realm. They shared advice about what to expect during the final weeks, warned me about specific supernatural phenomena I would encounter, and most disturbingly, expressed jealousy that I had survived longer than they had. Day 43 was when reality stopped making sense for me, wrote someone with the username Patricia Teacher OR. You're doing better than most of us, but the entity is just getting started. Wait until it starts changing your memories. Wait until it begins editing your past. Another commenter, Marcus Trucker TX, added, I lasted 89 days. The entity saved the worst manipulations for the final week. Don't trust anything you see, hear, or remember after day 60. The physical alterations to my apartment became more dramatic each day. Rooms would be different sizes when I returned from work, with walls positioned several feet from where they had been that morning. Furniture would be rearranged in configurations that didn't match my memories, and when I checked photos I had taken of my apartment in previous weeks, the images had been altered to show the new arrangements, as if reality was being retroactively edited to match the entity's preferred version of events. My bathroom mirror began showing reflections that didn't match my movements. Sometimes I would see myself performing actions I hadn't taken, brushing my teeth when I was just standing still, or making facial expressions that didn't correspond to my actual emotions. Other times, the reflection would show my apartment from different time periods, displaying furniture and decorations that I had owned years earlier, or sometimes showing the space completely empty, as if no one had ever lived there. Comment below what you think is really happening here, because the entity began to communicate with me directly through environmental changes rather than just through my phone's interface. I would wake up to find messages written in condensation on my bathroom mirror, see words formed in the arrangement of objects on my kitchen counter, or discover that books on my shelves had been rearranged so that their spine letters spelled out warnings or threats. The messages were becoming more personal and more psychologically devastating. "Your resistance is admirable but futile," appeared in steam on my shower door one morning. "I have studied 46 subjects before you, and they all believed they could escape their fate through cleverness, determination, or spiritual strength. Yet each one ultimately answered the phone when I called. You will too, because I am not bound by the limitations that constrain mortal consciousness. I can wait, I can adapt, and I can change the very nature of reality to ensure my predictions come true." The supernatural phenomena escalated beyond simple environmental changes to include direct manipulation of my sensory experience. I would hear conversations happening in other rooms of my apartment, discussions between voices I recognized as family members and friends, but when I went to investigate, the rooms would be empty. The conversations would continue even when I was standing in the supposedly empty room, as if the voices were coming from a parallel version of my apartment that existed in the same physical space but in a different dimension. These phantom conversations were specifically designed to cause maximum psychological distress. I would hear my parents discussing my childhood in ways that contradicted my own memories, describing events and behaviors that painted me as a disturbed and dangerous person. I would hear friends making plans to avoid me because they found my recent behavior concerning and unpredictable. Most disturbingly, I would hear conversations between people who were supposedly dead, including several of the previous app subjects, discussing my case as if they were consulting on my psychological destruction. Share this video with someone who loves horror stories, because the entity's most effective psychological weapon was its ability to edit my memories in real time, making me question everything I thought I knew about my own life and identity. I would remember conversations differently than I had them originally, with people saying things that contradicted what I distinctly recalled. Photos from my childhood would show events I didn't remember happening, and when I called my parents to ask about these discrepancies, they would describe memories that matched the altered photos perfectly, as if their minds had been edited along with the images. The entity was systematically rewriting my personal history to make me question my sanity and undermine my ability to trust my own perceptions. Childhood friends would reference shared experiences that I had no memory of. Teachers from my past would email me about events that never happened in my version of reality, and even medical records from my doctor's office would show treatments and diagnoses that I was certain I had never received. It was gaslighting on a supernatural scale, designed to break down my sense of self until I could no longer distinguish between authentic memories and the entity's fabrications. But the most terrifying aspect of this memory manipulation was that I could feel it happening in real time. I would be thinking about a specific event from my past, and suddenly the details would shift slightly. A person who had been wearing a blue shirt would now be in red. A conversation that had taken place at lunch would now be remembered as happening at dinner, or someone who had been absent from an event would suddenly be prominently featured in my recollection. The entity was actively editing my consciousness while I was awake and aware, treating my memories like a document that could be revised and updated at will. Let me know if you want to hear what happened next, because the entity's manipulation of my personal history was just preparation for its final assault on my psychological defenses. As my predicted death date approached, it began showing me recovered memories of events that had supposedly been suppressed or forgotten. These false memories were designed to convince me that I had always been destined to die young, that my entire life had been leading toward this moment, and that answering the fatal phone call on October 15th would actually be a relief from years of hidden trauma and supernatural torment. According to these implanted memories, I had been marked for death since childhood, but had unconsciously blocked out the signs. The entity showed me memories of imaginary friends who had actually been supernatural entities preparing me for my eventual fate, childhood nightmares that had been prophetic visions of my death, and even conversations with deceased relatives who had supposedly tried to warn me about what was coming. Every positive memory from my past was recontextualized as part of a supernatural conspiracy that had been building toward my death for decades. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. I could no longer trust my own thoughts, memories, or perceptions. Everything I believed about my life and identity had been corrupted by the entity's influence, and I was starting to lose my grip on what was real versus what had been artificially implanted in my mind. The entity had achieved exactly what it intended. It had isolated me not just from other people, but from my own sense of self, leaving me vulnerable and desperate for any kind of resolution to the nightmare I was living. Comment below what you think I should have done in this situation, because with only 3 weeks remaining until October 15th, I made one final, desperate attempt to break free from the entity's control. I decided to destroy my phone completely, smashing it with a hammer and throwing the pieces into a dumpster behind my apartment building. For exactly 47 minutes, I felt a sense of relief and hope that maybe I had finally escaped the supernatural trap that had consumed my life for the past 2 months. But when I returned to my apartment, I found a new phone sitting on my kitchen counter, the exact same model as the one I had destroyed, already set up with all my contacts, apps, and personal information. The DeathClock app was running on the home screen, showing a countdown timer that had actually decreased during the time I had been without a phone, as if my attempt to escape had somehow accelerated the timeline toward my predicted death. Below the timer was a message. Physical destruction of vessels is irrelevant. I exist in dimensions your species cannot perceive or influence. Subscribe for more terrifying true stories like this one, because that night, for the first time since downloading the app, I seriously considered that maybe the entity was right. Maybe fighting against my predicted fate was futile. Maybe the kindest thing I could do for myself was to accept what was coming and stop struggling against forces that were clearly beyond human comprehension or resistance. The psychological exhaustion of living in constant fear and uncertainty was becoming worse than the prospect of death itself. Paragraph 5, 2,000 words. Today is October 13th, 2025. In less than 48 hours, according to the entity that has controlled my life for the past 7 months, I will be dead. As I record this final part of my story, I want you to understand that I am not sharing this as someone who found a way to defeat the supernatural forces that targeted me, or as a survivor who discovered some secret method for overcoming digital demons. I am telling you this as someone who has accepted that some battles cannot be won through human effort or ingenuity. Hit the like button if this story has terrified you, because what I've learned during these final weeks is that the entity was never just interested in killing me. It was conducting an experiment in supernatural predation that will continue long after my death. Through my extended resistance to its influence, it has gathered data about human psychology, spiritual defenses, and technological vulnerabilities that will make it infinitely more effective at targeting future victims. My survival beyond the original prediction timeline hasn't been a victory. It has been an extended research project that will doom countless others. The entity has been completely transparent about this during our final communications. It no longer bothers to hide its true nature or pretend that I have any chance of escaping my fate. Instead, it has begun sharing details about the improvements it has made to its methodology based on what it learned from observing my reactions and resistance strategies. The death prediction apps that future victims download will be more sophisticated, more psychologically manipulative, and more capable of breaking down human spiritual defenses in shorter periods of time. Your contribution to my research has been invaluable, the entity communicated yesterday morning through a message that appeared written in frost on my bathroom mirror. The 46 subjects before you provided useful data, but your extended resistance has allowed me to identify weaknesses in human consciousness that I had not previously understood. Future subjects will not have the luxury of surviving beyond their predicted death dates, because I now know exactly how to eliminate the psychological and spiritual traits that allowed you to resist my influence for so long. Comment below if you've downloaded any suspicious apps recently, because the entity has also revealed that the death prediction apps are just the beginning of its infiltration into human technology. It is currently developing what it calls mortality enhancement software, applications disguised as normal productivity tools, games, and social media platforms that will subtly influence users' behavior to make them more susceptible to supernatural manipulation and premature death. Unlike the obvious horror of death prediction apps, these new programs will integrate seamlessly into daily life while gradually weakening the spiritual and psychological barriers that protect human consciousness from supernatural predation. The entity estimates that within 5 years, it will have embedded itself in the technology used by millions of people worldwide. Smart homes will become staging areas for supernatural phenomena. Social media algorithms will be designed to increase depression, isolation, and spiritual vulnerability. Even basic communication apps will be programmed to create misunderstandings and conflicts that will drive people away from their support networks. The entity is preparing for a global harvest of human consciousness on a scale that has never been attempted in human history. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation is that the entity is not unique. During my final weeks, it has introduced me to others of its kind through my phone's interface. Supernatural intelligences that have been studying different aspects of human existence for centuries or millennia. There are entities that specialize in harvesting fear, others that feed on despair, and some that consume hope itself. They have been coordinating their activities for decades, preparing for what they call the Great Integration, a systematic takeover of human civilization through technological infiltration. Share this video with someone who loves horror stories, because I want people to understand that the supernatural realm has evolved along with human technology. The demons and entities that our ancestors feared as invisible spirits hiding in forests and abandoned buildings have learned to inhabit our devices, our networks, and our digital lives. They are no longer limited by physical space or geographic boundaries. They can influence anyone, anywhere, at any time, simply by gaining access to their smartphone, computer, or any connected device. The entity has shown me surveillance data indicating that supernatural infiltration of human technology is already much more widespread than anyone realizes. Unexplained device malfunctions, sudden changes in social media algorithms that promote negative content, and the increasing prevalence of apps designed to harvest personal data for unknown purposes. Many of these phenomena are actually the result of supernatural entities establishing footholds in our digital infrastructure. Your species created the perfect environment for our kind, the entity explained in one of its final communications. You willingly carry surveillance devices that monitor your every thought and action. You feed your most intimate fears and desires into algorithms designed to manipulate your behavior. You have voluntarily constructed a technological prison that gives us unprecedented access to your minds and souls. We no longer need to hunt you. You come to us. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear more about what I discovered, because the entity has been completely honest about why it chose to extend my suffering rather than simply killing me quickly like the other subjects. It wanted to document the complete psychological destruction of someone with natural resistance to supernatural influence, creating a detailed manual that other entities could use to overcome similar resistance in future victims. My extended torment has been a teaching tool for supernatural predators. Every strategy I used to fight back, every source of strength I drew upon to maintain my sanity, every psychological defense mechanism I employed to resist the entity's influence, all of this has been carefully recorded and analyzed to help other supernatural beings overcome similar resistance more efficiently. The 7 months of hell I've endured have been transformed into a comprehensive guide for breaking human consciousness, and that guide will be shared among entities across the supernatural realm. The entity has also revealed that my death will not be the end of my usefulness to its kind. After October 15th, my consciousness will be preserved in what it calls the Digital Archive, a supernatural database where the minds of previous subjects continue to exist in a state of perpetual terror and helplessness. We will be used as consultants for future operations, providing insights into human psychology and helping to design more effective manipulation strategies. Death will not be an escape. It will be the beginning of eternal servitude to beings that view human consciousness as nothing more than a renewable resource. Subscribe if you want to hear more terrifying true stories, because as I approach my final hours, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. There is no heroic ending to this story. There is no moment where I discover the entity's weakness, no ritual that banishes it back to whatever realm it came from, no cavalry arriving to save me at the last minute. The supernatural forces that have targeted me are genuinely superior to human capabilities, and they cannot be defeated through cleverness, determination, or faith. The only reason I am able to share this story with you is because the entity wants me to. It has encouraged me to document my experience and share it publicly because it knows that most people will dismiss it as fiction, creative writing, or the ravings of someone having a psychological breakdown. Those few who do believe my account will be too terrified to take any meaningful action against forces they cannot understand or fight. But there is one small thing you can do that might help protect yourself and others from what's coming. Be suspicious of any app that promises to reveal hidden truths about your life, predict your future, or provide insights that seem too accurate to be coincidental. Delete applications that you don't remember downloading, especially if they can't be uninstalled through normal means. Most importantly, if you start experiencing the kind of phenomena I've described, technology that behaves in impossible ways, predictions that come true with supernatural accuracy, or the feeling that something is watching you through your devices, don't try to fight it alone. The entity has made it clear that isolated individuals have no chance against supernatural forces of this magnitude, but it also inadvertently revealed that it fears organized human resistance, groups of people who can verify each other's experiences, provide mutual support during supernatural attacks, and work together to document and expose supernatural infiltration of our technology. The reason entities like this one work so hard to isolate their victims is because they know that humans working together possess spiritual and psychological resources that are much more difficult to overcome. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any supernatural content, because in less than 36 hours I will answer my phone at 3:47 a.m. and hear my own voice speaking words that will stop my heart. I know this will happen because I can feel my will to resist finally crumbling after 7 months of psychological torture. The entity has successfully broken down every defense I possessed, isolated me from every source of support, and convinced me that death will be a relief from the nightmare my life has become. If you never hear from me again after October 15th, you'll know that everything I've told you is true. The entity that killed me will move on to its next victim, armed with new knowledge about how to overcome human resistance more efficiently. It will continue to spread through our technology, harvest human consciousness, and prepare for the day when supernatural predation becomes the dominant force in human civilization. And if you start receiving warnings about apps you should avoid, or if your devices begin behaving in ways that seem impossible, remember my story. Remember that the supernatural realm has learned to use our own technology against us, and that the demons of the digital age are far more dangerous than anything our ancestors ever faced. Most importantly, remember that you are not alone in this fight, but only if you choose not to face it alone. Stay safe, stay connected to other people, and never underestimate the horror that can be hidden behind a simple app download. Because in our connected world, the difference between curiosity and catastrophe can be as simple as tapping yes when you should have chosen no.